Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it is yet another breaking news podcast. It feels like we're just doing like 50% breaking news shows at this point and 50% regular shows. So great news. There's more breaking news. Our favorite kind of news.
The best kind of news is the breaking news, unless, of course, it's bad news. This, however, is good news for the Ohio State Buckeyes, as former Ole Miss defensive tackle / first baseman Tywone Malone has committed to Ohio State and will be transferring to Ohio State. A member of the 2021 class, I believe he redshirted as a true freshman and played his redshirt year last year, and now will have 3 years of eligibility at Ohio State. And Tom, for me, this is a guy they were on in high school, so there's some familiarity, but I think this gives you a little bit more proven depth, although maybe older depth, more so than maybe proven depth for Ohio State at a position where they need it.
Yeah, it's experienced depth, I would say. And, this is a little bit, there are a lot of parallels to the Josh Simmons transfer, and there are a lot of parallels to the Davis and Igbinosun transfer, and not just because they're both New Jersey guys coming via Ole Miss. In terms of Josh Simmons is not this. He was the offensive tackle who's transferred in from San Diego State, and he's not coming in as a two-time All-American or anything like that. But he provides them some really important depth at a spot where they absolutely needed it coming out of the spring. That was, I think, one of the biggest concerns. And Josh Simmons gives them some extra, just more options at a position where they really needed more options. In this case, Tywone Malone comes in, and the interior of the defensive line, it just felt like they were kind of one guy short there. You had Ty Hamilton, you had Mike Hall, you had Tyleik Williams, and then it was like maybe Jaden McKenzie, maybe Hero Kanu, but there wasn't a definite, this is a guy who is 100% going to be able to do what they need to do at that, as that fourth guy in the two deep on the interior of the defensive line. It feels like that's sort of what Malone fills for them.
Yeah, I think he played like in one game as a true freshman in 2021, came up with a sack last year as a redshirt freshman, 10 tackles, played in 13 games, 1 sack, tackle for loss, a couple of passes broken up. So I think, as you're saying, this gives them a fourth guy that is a bit more of a known quantity. Not that Caden McDonald or Will Smith Jr. or Jason Moore coming in can't be that guy. It's just now you have a bit better feeling as a third-year player coming in to help a defensive front. And now I wonder what this does for the established guys. Like, what does this mean? Mike Hall and Ty Hamilton will be at nose, and does Tywone Malone come in as the number 2-3 tech for Tyleik Williams? Is that how? Because it seems like that would maybe fit what they would want to do because of Larry Johnson's steadfast refusal to take Mike Hall away from nose tackle. Like, does this now just slot him in as the number 2-3 tech?
It seems like that might be how this shakes out. I mean, Malone's not really a nose, so I think there's a decent possibility that's how that works out. And we've seen them move guys around, flip-flop guys from side to side at times. So this is a little like when we talk about who's at the X and who's at the Z and who's at the H at receiver. It's like, well, Marvin Harris is at the X except when he's not, and you sort of see them. They'll move guys around in the interior of that defensive line at times too. But yeah, it seems like that's it. Wherever he ends, I feel like he's going to end up in a 3 tech, and however the rest of the guys shuffle out, like, okay, you've got 4 guys now that you can feel pretty good about, and then you mentioned the 3 guys coming in, the 3 true freshmen coming on in the interior of that defensive line. I think that those are very talented players. You just don't want to be in a position where you're relying on a true freshman. If a true freshman shows up and is ready to go, physically able to compete at that level, great. But the interior of the defensive line at the college level, especially in the Big Ten, that is something that, has your high school strength program really prepared you for that? Like, maybe. Will Smith was in for the spring. Caden McDonald and Jason Moore were not. So Those are guys who have not even gone through the winter workouts with Coach Mick. So you may see them, but those guys feel like guys who are probably going to be more role players this year, and then get them in the weight room get them a full off season, all that kind of stuff, and then they're ready to go. And Hero Canoe has been here for a couple of years, but you got to remember, he's from Germany. He has not played he has not played football at a high level for 8-10 years like a lot of these other guys have. He's been playing football for like 4 years, and so there's just still a little bit of a learning curve there, and I think he still ends up as a significant contributor on this team at some point. But now this takes a little bit of the pressure off him that he doesn't have to be that next guy this year. If he can get in that rotation, we've seen Larry Johnson work 6 guys deep in the interior of the defensive line before, and so if he's ready, he's ready. But now if he's not, it's not a disaster.
And Will Smith was injured for much, if not most, of spring ball. And for the 2 guys that are coming in the summer, just think of it as in 2021 when Tyleik Williams enrolled in the winter, Mike Hall enrolled in the summer. Hall redshirted. I think he maybe played his 4 games, but he wasn't out there as nearly as much as Tyleik Williams, who kind of burst onto the scene as, oh my gosh, is this Big Daddy Part 2? That sort of thing. And so it could take these incoming freshmen a year, especially Jason Moore. Like, you don't even know how big he's going to come in at. I think at last count, like maybe on his one of his recruiting profiles, he's listed at 6'6", 280. Another one maybe like 6'6", 260. So there, who knows? And we saw it with Jelani Thurman. He came in like 25 pounds, 28 pounds over what his recruiting list was. So who knows how big Jason Moore is going to come in at?
Well, I can tell you, I saw Jason Moore on the field at the spring game, and Jason Moore has definitely filled out a good amount since, a year ago, 2 years ago. I think we might have seen him in a camp. He was definitely made a recruiting visit a couple of years ago. And, spring game, I think he had a recruiting visit spring game 22 and now spring game 23. He looks like a guy who's put on 20 pounds. Like there was a conversation at one point, is he going to be an edge? Is he going to be a 3-tech? He is right now at I would have him solidly at the 3-tech spot, and that's where I would expect him to play at the next level. So he's starting to get to that point, but still, if you want to play in the interior of the defensive line, that is a rugged position at the college level, especially in the Big Ten, where you're going to be facing a lot of big 300. Wisconsin's going to be on the schedule this year, so you're going to have the Wisconsin offensive line, and no disrespect to the DC area offensive lines he's been facing at the high school level, they are probably not a bunch of 330-pound Wisconsin farm boys. So it is, there's just a little bit of a ramp up period for all those guys, and not having to get thrown into the fire day one. That's good, because if you get thrown into the fire day one, you're not physically ready. You're not necessarily mentally ready in terms of really knowing the defense, understanding the defense, reading your keys, all that kind of stuff. That's a lot to get thrown at you, especially if you're enrolling in the summer. So not having to have that get thrown at you, with that level of urgency, that is only good news.
And all of these guys that we're talking about that haven't really done anything yet, in 2024, any one of those guys could be a starter. I've seen these way too early mock drafts. All 4 of those juniors of Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Tyleik Williams, and Mike Hall, I've seen in the first round of I almost said legitimate mock drafts. Legitimate people's mock drafts.
Let me tell you how many legitimate mock drafts there are 12 months out. Like, Joe Lunardi is great at bracketology. Let me tell you how much I care about Joe Lunardi's bracketology this time of year. Not that much. Much the same for mock drafts 12 months out, where it's like, well, let me project the exact NFL standings and also the roster moves that each of these NFL teams will make in the next year, and also the development of all these college players. I'm sure the intersection of these 3 things is going to be incredibly accurate 12 months out.
Yeah, I do remember Sevyn Banks being a top 10 pick in some mock drafts, and of course Shaun Wade we all thought was going to be a first rounder. So I don't expect all 4 of those guys. For one, I don't expect all 4 of them to leave after this year, though they certainly could, and I wouldn't expect all 4 to be first rounders, just because that doesn't happen. Now we knew it was going to be a good class, and we had some expectations, but nobody to this point, and I'd even say JT Tuimoloau out to this point, hasn't played like a first rounder consistently. It could happen certainly as a junior, but it doesn't normally happen or doesn't ever happen where you have 4 guys in one class. I'm not even sure Georgia has done that with all of their first rounders.
I was trying to remember like those mid-2010s Clemson teams, like the Dexter Lawrence teams.
Christian Wilkins.
They might have had Christian Wilkins. They might have had 2 first rounders and then a second or a third or something. But yeah, I mean, four first rounders in the same, out of the same recruiting class at the same position group, all in the same year. That's realistically not going to happen. But there are. What that tells you is all 4 of them have first round talent, and they had the first round ceiling, and that's if you have 4 guys with a first round ceiling, we've talked about this before, but if we're having this conversation in January when it is less stupid to be having this conversation, if you're having the 4 NFL defensive linemen out of leaving Ohio State early, that means that is great news for the 2023 Buckeyes. You are probably looking back at a very good football season if that's the case. And then 2024, well, it's going to be a very young defensive line, but you have the Kenyatta Jackson who kind of took the step up this year. You're adding, the addition of Tywone Malone today. All of those guys, all those pieces, those are going to be important pieces next year. All the guys you just mentioned, and Jason Moore and Ken McDonald and Will Smith, and those are guys, and Hero Canoe, those are guys going to be taking a much bigger role on the 2024 team if that happens. But you will probably be enjoying life quite a bit if that comes to pass.
And even if you lose all 4 of those guys, you still have Ty Hamilton coming back, and obviously they've been recruiting, so there will be some more. It won't be barren. As I mentioned, Tywone Malone, a member of the Ole Miss baseball team. I believe, looking back a few weeks back when I was looking at his baseball stats, he was 4 of 9 on the season with 2 home runs. Not bad. If a member of the national championship team, so I guess that's maybe why he didn't play as much as some people who hit 2 home runs on average every 9 at bats. Home run every 4.5 at bats, if you will. Now that may be 6 plate appearances, he may have walked a couple of times, so it's not that impressive. But still, not bad.
Yeah, if you're playing on that team, that's and Ole Miss, that was a weird Ole Miss year where they were, I think, the last team to get into the College World Series, and then they won it. They made this like improbable run, but yeah, and someone on our board said, like, what does it look like to have a defensive tackle playing baseball? And I found one of the videos of him hitting one of his home runs, and it looks like a bigger version of Frank Thomas, basically at the plate, and yeah, he looks like a football player playing baseball. And I think you find with, not playing the fact that he wanted to play baseball was a big reason why he ended up at Ole Miss instead of Ohio State coming out of high school. And I think a couple of years into your college career, remember when JT Tuimoloau wanted to come to Ohio State to play basketball too? And, that was something that got talked about when he committed. And boy, you haven't heard a lot about JT Tuimoloau playing basketball since then. And I think that's one of those things where you sort of realize the amount of work that goes into playing football at the level that you want to be playing football, and you want to make the NFL. Well, okay, but you can't really split time. Justin Fields was a great baseball player. Justin Fields didn't play baseball at Ohio State. You just, at some point, you get to the point where you can't split your time that much, because there's too much time, there's too much effort, there's too much training, there's too much film study, all of that to get to the level you want to be at as a football player, to be able to do both things. And that's, I'm going to guess that's part of Tywone Malone's decision here, where, okay, I went to Ole Miss because I wanted to also play baseball. I did that, but now I really want to kind of focus on football.
Yeah, you can really only do one sport at this level now, and that's one of the reasons Bronny James is at USC. He wanted to play football at Ohio State. Ryan Day said no. So you can't play football and basketball. So now he's going to go to USC, and I'll probably starting free safety this year for the Trojans. And you know what? Maybe the defense will be better because of it.
Completely ignoring that non sequitur. I was thinking back at how frequently, like in the 1990s and early 2000s, you had 2 sport players at Ohio State. Nate Sally played safety for the football team and also played for the basketball team. Tony Eisenhard was a tight end and also played for the basketball team. Ricky Dudley very famously played basketball and then played football. Not John at Lumpkin. The same time. John Lumpkin, played tight end and also played a lot of tight ends. as it turns out, playing on the basketball team. Has anyone done it since Nate Sally? I don't remember anyone doing it. And that's like 20 years ago now. And, a lot of the two-sport athletes, that was a thing in the 90s, and Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson and Brian Jordan did that that was all baseball and football.
Ricky Williams did it at Texas.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Ricky Williams did it at Texas. Russell Wilson, I'm trying to remember if Russell Wilson played baseball at North Carolina State. He might have. Kyler Murray was a baseball player, got drafted in the first round by the Oakland A's. It happens, but it feels like it happens less now than it used to, especially for really high level programs. And I think that's, sort of reflective of the increased demands on players and all that right now that, even compared to 20, 30 years ago, you might have been able to do it. It probably, there was probably some opportunity cost there where you lost a little bit of a development on both sides of the equation, but you could do it. Now it feels like that's more or less a thing of the past.
Yeah, even in high school, coaches begging athletes to play multiple sports. But once you get, say, like a quarterback, as a fifth grade quarterback, boom, you're some of these guys are just quarterbacks for the rest of their lives through high school. And then maybe you go into college, but like that's all they are. And they've got their quarterback coach. That's why I think that's one of the reasons I think Ryan Day really, really likes Lincoln Kienholz, because he's, basketball, baseball, football, obviously. And it just, has a feel for all of these things. Tywone Malone, another one of those guys who, just an overall athlete, and Ohio State can always use those kinds of guys on the defensive line. Anything else, Tom, before we get out of here?
No, I think we're good until the next breaking news podcast, which should be happening any minute now at the rate we're going.
We should just put two together. Should we just sit here and wait?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, just cover your mouth and be like, wow, Ohio State has just landed commitment from, and then cover your mouth, and we'll just dub in whatever the name is.
Perfect. I love it.
Furl Mangus,
yes. We should go back and do old-timey instant reactions from breaking news 100 years ago. Check Holly.
We'll have to do it as a newsreel, but I think we can put that together. I think that would be a good. All right, we have off-season project. Here we go.
That sounds like a lot of work for the off-season. And as we know, I do not like to work during the off-season. Anyway, that will do it for us today. I want to thank you all for joining us during this breaking news edition of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. Good news, Tywone Malone, now a Buckeye, all of these years waiting for him, not unlike Antoine Jackson back in the day, who went to Auburn and then junior college, much like Ole Miss as a junior college, and then to Ohio State. I will also add, before I am trying to get out of here, I posted a video on Twitter of his highlights, of Tywone Malone's highlights. The first one is he is a wide receiver, and they're just throwing him a streak down the sideline. This is, I think, maybe his junior or senior year in high school, to give you an idea. And then the next three highlights are him hitting home runs. So that's what Ohio State is getting at defensive tackle. A long ball hitter who can also go get the deep ball. That's exactly what you want on the interior of your defensive line. So thank you all for joining us. We will talk to you guys later.